So this is Pamela from Animal Justice Emergency, and today we've got an amazing special guest. We've got Ronnie Lee, who founded the Animal Liberation Front many years ago, and who was actually jailed for 6 years for his work in protecting animals. This is part of a longer conversation. In this part of the conversation, we're talking about how vegans need to analyse if their actions are effective and how to make their activism much more effective.
One of the problems is people don't think enough. People don't analyse things enough. We're dealing with a highly emotional subject that people want to go, oh, I want to do something about that. I want to get out and do it. Blah, blah, blah. That's the active people. But I think the difficulty is that you kind of have to say, well, hang on a minute. I kind of need to actually analyse what is going to be the most effective thing to do. And often it isn't the most emotional thing. In fact, it really is. Often it's just quite boring. We don't think enough, before we act. We don't analyse enough. I think this is why a lot of people are drawn to SAFE, because it's very emotional. Oh, we saw the animals, and wasn't it terrible? And they were going, and I kind of felt I needed to be there to bear witness. Well, bearing witness to something doesn't stop it. Years and years ago, I remember when I first came into the movement, that you get these people standing outside of, and it used to be, like somebody that was a pensioner, or something like that, stood with a placard outside of vivisection lab saying, stop this cruelty. I think, well, that isn't actually stopping anything. It's not making any difference to people in there. They're kind of probably somewhere where no members of the public see it, because these places aren't usually very public. And I'd say to them, well, what are you doing? They go, I'm bearing witness. I'm bearing witness. What does that mean? That's not changing anything. That's not. You're doing it kind of for you. They're doing it for them to feel that I bore witness, and it was kind of for me. It's like, because it isn't changing anything outside of them, is it? And I kind of worry that SAFE can be a bit like that. Not necessarily saying always, because I think sometimes that can be used in a way to educate people. But I think in the middle of nowhere, where most of these places are slaughterhouses, they're on an industrial estate. You stood with placards watching animals that are going to be killed. You can't do anything to stop it. And that must be horrendously bad for your mental health to do that. And you're not really changing anything, not really. It might be a little bit. I suppose you might put the video out on your Facebook and somebody else might see it, but how often are you going to do that? People think that if something evokes strong feelings in them, that somehow that means it's going to change other people. But it doesn't really work like that. People are like, I've been to a demo, that was a good demo. Oh, why was it a good demo? Oh, I shouted, and I marched along and I shouted. And you think, well, yeah, but did it make any difference? Did it change anything? Apart from that you shouted and you got it off your chest. I think that's kind of in the way that our emotions kind of get in the way of what we need to do. I think emotion's important, but you use it as a fuel. You say, well, this makes me angry, so what I'm going to do is use that anger as a fuel, drive me on, while I do things that actually work. I'm not going to let that anger control me. And I think what happens is people kind of let the emotions, so using the emotions as a fuel, they allow the emotions to control them, and then they end up doing things that, when you analyse it, aren't really very effective. And when you're young, it's kind of harder. And I think as I've got older, I have become more reflective and more thoughtful about things. When I was younger, I just was probably a bit more. I've got a nephew, a young nephew. He's 19. He became vegan a couple of months ago. I had a chat to him. I said, "Where do you think it is?" I said, "Like our vegan group, we've got no one under 45 who's actually an activist." I said, "Why do you think that is? Why there's no young people?" He said, "Oh, I think they probably think it's boring doing a street stall, delivering leaflets. Young people, they think it's boring." And I kind of think, well, surely that shouldn't be relevant. It's boring or not, it should be relevant, but it kind of is. And if it's like something that's kind of more exciting, like there's a march or there's shouting and stuff, you're going to get more young people go to that because it appeals more to their sort of emotional needs.
What you mean, and it's that whole, but it's that whole thing of like, who you're doing it for. And it's
Yeah.
the performative aspect of the, like the cubes and the saves, as not denigrating the motives of the people that go to them, because I know that they go through a lot of pain and anguish.
Yeah.
In terms of the effectiveness, I think you're 100% there. Like, if something is very emotionally sort of like, oh, I'm reading this speech and I'm crying and everybody's encouraging me, and then I'm posting it on social media, and what does it actually achieve? Well, but they would say that, people see it and then people change. Well, maybe they do, but how many thousands more hours or minutes of anguished pigs and anguished people at saves do we need to see? That's what I would say. And if you are going to go to saves, well, why don't you amp it up a bit, like you said, and do something with that footage, like maybe show it in the local town where you are, the local group, bring it into the community, make it relevant. Make it relevant to the local community. So I think that all these sort of different sort of like the saves and the cubes and whatever could be actually a great jumping off point for the sort of like low grassroots activism that you're talking about.
I think they could. I mean, if we had, kind of thankfully, we haven't got a local storehouse. Where our storehouse used to be, there's a McDonald's now, so it hasn't really improved. If there was a local storehouse, and some people said, well, we want to go and do vigils outside the stores, I wouldn't try and stop them from doing it. I'd just say, well, look, I'd try and guide them in how they use it. I said, all right, that's great. You're going to go and do vigils outside there. But like, when you get the footage, let's use that locally. Let's use that as kind of a way of like educating people locally. Even like you might be able to do an ad with it on social media and target local people, or have it as something on the store. I wouldn't stop them, but I'd try and guide them to make it so, and try and get a story about it in the local newspaper, for instance. Try and guide it so it would actually be more effective in education. And I think a lot of them don't think that. They don't think further than actually, I need to be outside bearing witness, end of type of thing. They don't think of, well, how can I use this as an educational thing? And I think that's the problem. Also, the other thing that is a bit alien to me is how there seems to be a lot more structure to kind of things these days, because like when I first became involved in the movement, everything was very autonomous, like on a local level. If you had a local animal rights group, it was kind of autonomous. It wasn't part of anything else. You kind of had connections with other groups because you knew people in other groups and you had connections with other groups. But that was about the kind of limit of the structure of it. Whereas now you've got all these like local safe groups, but they're part of a big organisation. There is like a hierarchy to it, and there is with Extinction Rebellion, and there is with Animal Rebellion, and there is with AV. These aren't autonomous groups. It's part of a bigger structure, and I find that a bit alien because I've never operated like that. It's always been like really much more autonomous. There's been connection. There hasn't been that kind of organisation with it, and that seems to be a sort of new thing. And it seems in a way that people find it difficult to operate without that.
It's kind of ironic, that this franchise activism mentality is the one that is so beloved by so many people who think of themselves as, in this neoliberal society, which is all about individualism, but they end up doing franchised versions.
Yeah, they are franchise. I mean, that's a good word, actually, franchise, because they are kind of trademarked, aren't they?
It is a franchise. It's my brother operates a franchise in Australia, and it's about donuts, and we all and it's basically like that. They tell you what to wear, they tell you what the product is. But you've got parameters. Don't wear this. Don't wear t-shirts with other animal groups slogans on, because that will confuse people. I saw that on a Facebook post today.
So I don't think we need that. I think we need a network, and we need communication. We need working together. And I'd like to see like a network of like local animal liberation groups. So, I mean, it doesn't really matter to me whether they call them vegan groups or animal rights groups. It's kind of what they do that's important. I think there's a certain advantage in calling yourself a vegan group. I think it opens more doors in terms of doing events. I wouldn't want to like control the internal workings of those groups. I wouldn't want to kind of have an organisation that said, you've got to wear this, you've got to do this.
Maybe you would, Ronnie, if you were sort of like getting, you were selling the merch, like the T-shirts.
Oh yeah, if I was making a load of money out of it, yeah, we do need a network, because I think we kind of need some sort of structure for sharing ideas, talking about days of action, and also structure that would enable us to work to set up other groups, set up more groups, and that would be a structure of autonomous groups in a federal situation. It wouldn't be a top down. It would be like everyone's level, but everyone's connected, and that's how I've always been used to doing things. That's what the ALF was like.
It's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege to speak with you, Ronnie, today.
Smashing.
Wow, powerful words there from Ronnie Lee. If you want to see more content like this, please like, subscribe and share. This is Pamela from Animal Justice Emergency, and together we can stop the war against animals.